Next up, the CarBuyer Advisor, your first place to turn for everything automotive. Taking a stand for consumer education and dedicated to connecting you with the industry's finest automotive products, services, and advice. And now, please welcome the CarBuyer Advisor.
For those of you that have been listening to our show, there's an underlying mission that we're engaged in. It's been described as the most brilliant not-a-shot-fired revolution in the history of capitalism. No shots fired because we pay absolutely no attention to low-quality businesses. We just ignore they exist. Face it, ambush journalism has been done. How effective has it been? Consumer reform is what we're committed to. And if as a community in one swift action we unite and use our real power as consumers, our money, to only support the highest quality businesses, those that are genetically predisposed to providing quality products and services fairly priced, what do you think would be the outcome? We'd be rid of the lower quality ones once and for all. Some would close their doors while others attempt to reinvent themselves, but ultimately we, the consumers, would win. Only great businesses with excellent business practices would continue to exist. What we want is for you to then apply this expectation to everything you consume. Once you start being treated properly by the businesses that we endorse, you will no longer be willing to accept or support anything else or anything less. We base our show on the best of each automotive category, and if you do the math, there are over 100 of these categories. We interview the businesses we endorse so you can get to know them so that you don't just have to take our word for it. Now, shortly after we introduced our next guest on our first show, they received another award. When you see or hear about a business that is recognized as the best by more than one source, it makes good sense for you to see why. This is what the Consumer Business Review that can be found inside the Reno News and Review had to say about our next guest. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to take your Japanese car to just one place for all of your work? In Sparks, there is such a place, and we're talking about Preferred Auto Care. With shop facilities at 17025 Gregg Street, Preferred Auto Care is the area's leading repair shop. Ask anyone who's used their services. They'll tell you this is the only stop you need to make on your way to worry-free driving. From a simple oil change to a complex engine repair, Preferred Auto Care has the equipment, parts, and skill to repair or replace any part that may malfunction. With years of recommendations behind them, Preferred Auto Care has established the type of reputation you can trust. So when you need anything done to your car, see the best first. Tom, we are so proud of your accomplishments. We had to bring you back so that our community could hear why. I really think the real why is why, after hearing about your accomplishments, would anyone take their Honda, Acura, Toyota, Lexus, or Subaru anywhere else? Please welcome back to our show, Tom O'Donnell, Preferred Auto Care.
Thanks, Mitch.
First of all, congratulations. And I'm so proud of you. Twice in the last few months, you've been recognized for your commitment to our community and the cars they drive. I'm delighted we were the first, but recognizing your accomplishments. But this is a culmination of decades worth of that level of commitment, and you must really be honored.
Oh, I'm really honored. It was something that really came unexpected.
Well, you do this and you put your heart and soul into it, and I've witnessed that. I come to your place on a regular basis, and it's got to feel good that at some point in time you do it, and you don't do it for the recognition. You do it because that's just who you genetically are. But when this starts to happen, what's going through your mind? I mean,
well, nothing's really going through my mind. You just do everything that people like to, how do they want their car done, and take care of the customer. And it just comes naturally. And
then all of a sudden you get acknowledged for it, and it's got to be rewarding emotionally.
Yeah, it's very much rewarding.
Now, I want our community to really wrap their mind around how big of a deal this is. So I'd like you to start, if you would, but with a little history lesson about Preferred Auto Care, where it all started, how many years you've been in the automotive industry, and how many years you've been doing the business this way.
Oh, well, we've been in business for about 21 years, over 20 in Reno. We had a shop in California for 1 year, but too many people, so we left. Been doing automotive repair since about 77. And it's been Well, it's been a real experience.
So that's, if I do the math correctly, over 3 decades of experience that goes into this. But, then again, to give that level of commitment every day for that length of time, it's really unheard of almost. I hate to say that, but this is why our show exists. It's the exception to the rule for somebody to give that level of service for that length of time. Now, when I heard about this award, I had to ask you what you think sets you apart from the rest. And your first response was that you valued your customers' time. And share with our listeners what you meant by that.
Part of the thing is we work by appointment only. And the reason we do that is because people value their time. We want to be able to try to get the customer back their car as soon as possible. So I will not overbook like maybe other shops or like maybe airlines do, and then you lose a certain percentage of your business. No, you get your car in, we get it done in one day. If we have to order a part, sometimes it's 2 days, but you get your car back right away. We do not have cars lingering around the shop for months and months and months.
Well, and so that's respect of your consumer, and then this is one of the things, and then you mentioned that why you only work on specific makes, and what's the reason for that?
Well, the main reason is we really know the cars very, very well. And it's just specializing is just, I don't know. It's just the way to go. You get to know the product.
Well, you gave me an example about, where you started with the first make and how it started to grow from there to, and the reasons for that, about some of the different commonalities between them. So let's first start by telling them, the makes and the what you work on.
Well, I started on Hondas probably close to 30 years ago. And what happened was, as the cars started to change, they needed fewer and fewer repairs. I needed to expand. Well, then I got somebody that specialized in Toyotas. Well, Toyotas are really similar to Hondas as far as parts. They're designed the same way. They don't reinvent the wheel. They're made by basically the same companies. Like Honda does not make. Well, they make some of their own parts, but primarily most of their parts are made by a different company. It could be Nippon Denso, Nippon Seiko, Koyo, NSK. And Toyota and Subaru basically have all their parts made by the same manufacturers. And since they're all made the same, you don't have to, they're designed the same too. You're not trying to.
So it's a natural progression to be able to work on these and to specialize in them as well, because you're so familiar with that type of product and how they're built and how to repair and work on them.
Oh, by all means.
You shared an example of how much of a factor that specializing in certain makes played when diagnosing problems. And you shared with me one that I'd like you to share with our listeners about a customer that had an intermittent start or no start, or the car would shut off while they were driving it. And on an intermittent level, some of these types of problems can be really annoying for a consumer.
Oh, yeah, it's very annoying. That's another thing that specializing comes into hand is cars that have an intermittent problem. If you go to some places, they could spend hours and hours and hours. They're never going to find it because it won't ever happen to them. So we know it's not going to happen to us either. So basically, it starts with asking them questions. When does it do it? How does it do it? What happens? If you're driving along, do the dash lights go off? Do the dash lights stay on? And then by doing all this, we use our educated, it still is an educated guess, but it's a very, very good educated guess.
Well, you start to see the same things over and over again, and you fix one, so you would assume to try that on this one as well. And so you had discussed with me this one particular problem that exists on, I'm not sure which make it was.
Well, on Hondas and Acuras, they have a problem with some of the main relays, the main fuel pump relays. And we've seen it many times where they come in and they have a new fuel pump in the car. Well, they still have a problem. Well, that's because they didn't fix the problem. They assumed that was the problem just by their diagnostic procedures.
What I thought was interesting is how you approach even when you believe you have seen this in the past and you've seen it a number of times over a number of years, decades, the similar problem, same problem coming back to you over and over again from different people over a period of time. How you even proceeded to work to do that was a basis where you took some of the guesswork out of it. You actually explained the relay marking process and how that works.
Yeah, well, if we believe it's a failed component and we can't duplicate it, what we'll do is we'll replace the part that is the most logical failure part, and we'll tag it. We'll put their name and the date on it. If they come back with the same problem, we can put we save their old part, we can put it back in their car, and we can go on and then we'll apply the money they spent for that repair towards the correct repair.
Well, and you mentioned these relays is the one that we're talking about, where people will go after the fuel pump and buy a fuel pump, and that wasn't really the problem. It was ultimately a relay. And how many of those over the years have you actually put in and taken back?
Well, I've put in hundreds. How many have I put back in? 0.
So, I mean, this is more than just an educated guess, but you're still committed to, even though you have never had to put one back in a car, it's always been the actual problem when you've kind of diagnosed that this is the potential. And just because a car has a run drivability problem doesn't mean it's that relay. That's why the investigation with the customer is so important, the conversation. But you've done this, and you still tag them and mark them and date them and offer the consumer the opportunity, if that doesn't fix it, to put it back in the car, but you've never had to do that.
That's correct.
But you still continue to do that just in case one day somebody does have a need to get their credit.
You never know.
I think I'm hoping our consumers really get what that really looks like to them, that level of integrity behind, when you're making even an educated, 99.99% logical guess, with the experience that you have, the level of integrity that goes behind still, making certain that was the ultimate problem that they really had. Now, you were just talking about this too. I'd like you to spend a little bit more time on it. The diagnostic process, it involves more than just knowing the car, but hearing the full story from the customer.
Yeah, it starts with asking questions and knowing what questions to ask. Like I was saying, when say somebody, their car is dying, but they're driving along and it just dies. Well, when it dies, do the dash lights go on? Do the dash lights go off? If the dash lights go off, that means that the car is basically turning itself off. If the dash lights stay on, it could be something cutting off the fuel supply, something cutting off the electrical. You need to know these things because you have to narrow it down.
Well, and I think that I think sometimes I worry, Tom, that people really miss how much that translates into reducing the repair cost. In comparison to the typical, here are my keys, I have an intermittent problem, call me when you figure it out. I mean, the labor cost starts right then when they try to start tracking down a problem and the time they spend just trying to duplicate that problem. And it's really huge that our listeners get this concept. That conversation that you have diagnosing that could save them hundreds of dollars and hours worth of labor costs just to track down a problem. You also attributed your success to using quality parts. And we've talked about this on several occasions. I think the biggest automotive scam that consumers are falling prey to, and in increasing numbers because of the current economy, is they're becoming more price shoppers, not quality shoppers, and they're willing to accept inferior parts in order to get attracted by these lower prices. Worse, I think they think they're saving money. And you were sharing with me how true that is and sad it was. But you had an example about fuel pumps that you see.
Well, we've been doing Hondas and Toyotas for many, many years, and seems like most of the fuel pumps we've ever replaced in a vehicle, every time we opened it up, there was an inferior quality part fuel pump in there that somebody else replaced, and it doesn't last very long. Now, there's such thing as cheap or price and value is more important than price, because if your car went 250,000 miles on a fuel pump, don't you want to go another 250? Well, realistically, go another 250?
Right.
And you have to use quality parts.
Well, and we were talking about OEM as in comparison to aftermarket, and I don't, if people are not familiar with even the acronym OEM, share the difference between that.
OEM is original equipment manufacturer, and if you go to buy your own part, if you can find an OEM part, basically what an OEM part could be, it could be bought directly from the dealership, or the manufacturer will sell them separately away from the dealer, but you have to know which one it is. And what it is, it's like a water pump. ASE makes Toyota water pumps. But if you don't know that, so you can get a factory part for less money. Well, let me reword that. OEM part for less money.
Manufactured by the company that produces it for the
That's correct, because the factory normally doesn't make all their own parts.
And so what it is, it's the same part without maybe their logo on it.
That would be 100% correct.
But made identically, or sometimes even with that logo just removed. You showed me one of those.
We've seen that before, where the logo is actually ground off.
So help me understand this, because this is where I have my biggest problem. I mean, I've managed and run businesses for decades. And I just don't understand why some businesses would even use inferior parts. When the part fails, the customer that is facing that same failure and has to pay again for that same repair is not likely to continue to go back there. Well, some people may, and that's really even sadder because once shame on them and twice shame on you. But how long can they do that in a community our size? And how does that translate to what you're doing?
Well, one of the problems is using inferior quality parts. They usually make it out of warranty that the company's backing it on. And so what happens is the part, say a part lasts 100,000 miles from the factory, and then they put a part in that lasts 20,000 miles, or the warranty is 1 year, 12,000 miles. They're out of warranty, but they're paying again to have it repaired again.
So they didn't save money, and ultimately, for pennies, it's really a fraction between an aftermarket part and an OEM that doesn't have a logo on it part, for an example. There's not that much of a difference, is there?
No.
To really use a quality part in that process. But why do you think that shops then would use those other parts? What's their gain?
Well, part of it is they may have been doing it for years. They don't know any better. They want to reduce either the cost to the consumer or line their pockets with money.
Well, and I think all three of those are really valid points. You also shared another thing that sets you apart from the rest was being able to provide your customers a price to value commitment. And you mentioned that earlier. What do you mean by price to value commitment?
Now, price to value, there's such thing as just getting something in and out and having the job done, or having value where your overall product is going to last a long time. There's a huge difference. So you can get it done and save money, but your car might not last that long with the parts they put on it. You continue to have more problems.
Well, and you also attributed your successes to the fact in many repair shops, for that fact, the majority of them, customers are really being sold service by commissioned salespeople, and that's different in your place.
No, yeah, we never use commissioned salespeople. Everyone is hourly or salary, and by doing that, what happens is you're not going to be sold unnecessary repairs because they're not going to try to upsell something that you may not really need.
But when somebody walks into your shop, you don't even have one of those.
No.
Who do they deal with when they come in to get a repair job done?
They're going to deal with me.
Well, and that's really amazing. 27 years, you said you've been in business, and you are the person that greets and does the repair estimates and closes the bills and decides what things are recommended and what things can wait. I hope you don't mind. I got to share this story because I was in your shop last week, and somebody had a car with 75,000 miles on it, and you were mentioning to them that their serpentine belt was showing wear and it needed to be replaced. On that car, at 90,000 miles, I guess a timing belt was going to be necessary. And in order to get to the timing belt, the serpentine belt had to come off. And you didn't want to charge them twice that labor when they could do them both at the same time. So I will really want people to understand the translation of what your commitment is to why you wouldn't have, where other shops may have charged for the serpentine belt and then come back and revisited the timing belt as a separate repair. And the consumer may never have known that they were paying for that labor twice. They may not have known that the serpentine belt had to come off to do that. What is it that really that makes you act that way? I mean,
I don't know. The way I was raised, you just when like in this particular vehicle, he was going to need his timing belt at 90,000 miles. Well, his serpentine belt was wearing. It didn't merit replacement yet, but it's going to merit replacement soon. So I figured probably about 85,000 miles, another 10,000 miles, he's going to need the serpentine belt. He might want to do his timing belt and everything at the same time because of that. It was going to have to come off. He's going to have to pay double labor.
But what it really shows is, you're right, I think it does come down to core fundamental values and how you're raised and your belief systems, because you could have for profit charged for that and really without anyone really maybe even never knowing the difference. But that's not who you are. And I really wanted our listeners to understand that, because you said it is beliefs, it is how you're raised, it's your fundamental values, and thank you for sharing that. We talked about the specialization ties into how that ties into when people bring a car into you for a pre-purchase inspection as well. Your knowledge of that car and when you're inspecting a car before they buy one. And by the way, folks, I want you to make sure you get this. The CarBuyer Advisor explicitly suggests that you have a pre-purchase inspection done by a qualified repair center before you buy any vehicle. But Tom, you had a story about one of your customers that brought a car to you and that you saw the same number of times in as many days.
We had a customer one time, he brought a Acura Integra and wanted to do a vehicle inspection on it. So we did a complete inspection on it. The people paid their $50, and the car was a piece of junk. Oh my gosh, it was junk. So naturally, they didn't buy it. Well, then probably 3 days later, another customer said they had a car for me to check out. They were thinking about purchasing it. Up, drove the same exact car. I walked up to him. I says, "Oh, you don't want this car."
Well, and you didn't charge them for the inspection process again either. And I think it's really interesting. The saddest part about that, somebody bought that car, and they didn't come to you and have that pre-purchase inspection done. And, you can only imagine the problems that they had after that. All we have to offer our community as a show is integrity in the quality of the businesses we invite to be guests, and you validate that. So you all know Preferred Auto Care about their most recent award. We've also invited them to be regular guests on our show because they raised the bar. All you have to do now is raise your expectations of your present service and repair shop. If you own a Honda, Acura, Toyota, Lexus, or Subaru, and you're not 100% satisfied with your present automotive service repair, please call Tom at Preferred Auto Care. Be sure to tell him you heard about him on the CarBuyer Advisor radio show. And Tom, how do they get a hold of you?
Now they can call us at 355-7033 Monday through Friday, or they can stop by at 1705 Gregg Street in Sparks.
And you can also find them on our preferred business page on our website, thecarbuyerinvestor.com.